Since philosophy is a human effort, to comprehend the problem of the universe, it is subject to the influences of race and culture. Each nation has its own characteristic mentality, its particular intellectual bent. In all the fleeting centuries of history and all the vicissitudes through which India has passed, a certain marked identity is visible. It has held fast to certain psychological traits which constitute its special heritage, and they will be the characteristic marks of the Indian people so long as they are privileged to have a separate existence. Individuality means independence of growth. It is not necessarily unlikeness. There cannot be complete unlikeness, since man, the world over, is the same, especially so far as the aspects of spirit are concerned. The variations are traceable to distinctions in age, history, and temperament. They add to the wealth of the world. Culture. Since there is no royal road to philosophic development any more than to any other result worth having. Before we notice the characteristic features of Indian thought, a few words may be said about the influence of the West on Indian thought. The question is frequently raised whether and to what extent thought borrowed its ideas from foreign sources. The question is frequently raised whether and to what extent Indian thought borrowed its ideas from foreign sources, such as Greece. Some of the views put forward by Indian thinkers resemble certain doctrines developed in ancient Greece, so much that anybody interested in discrediting this or that thought system can easily do so. Sir William Jones wrote, "Of the philosophical schools, it will be sufficient here to remark that the first Nyaya seems analogous to the Peripatetic, the second, sometimes called Vaisheshika, to the Ionic, the two Mimamsas, of which the second is often distinguished by the name of Vedanta, to the Platonic, the first Samkhya to the Italic, and the second of Patanjali, to the Stoic philosophy. So that Gautama corresponds with Aristotle, Kanada with Thales, Jaimini with Socrates, Vyasa with Plato, Kapila with Pythagoras, and Patanjali with Zeno." While the opinion that Greek thought has been influenced by the Indian is frequently held, it is not so often urged that Indian thought owes much to Greek speculation. The question of the affiliation of these ideas is a useless pursuit. To an unbiased mind, the coincidences will be an evidence of historical parallelism. There is no material evidence to prove any direct borrowings, at any rate by India, from the West. Our account of Indian thought will show that it is an independent venture of the human mind. Philosophical problems are discussed without any influence from or relation to the West. In spite of occasional intercourse with the West, India had the freedom to develop its own ideal life, philosophy, and religion. Whatever be the truth about the original home of the Aryans who came down to the peninsula, they soon lost touch with their kindred in the West or the North and developed own lines of their own. It is true that India was again and again invaded by armies pouring into it through the northwestern passes, but none of them, with the exception of Alexander's, did anything to promote spiritual intercourse between the two worlds. Only latterly, when the gateway of the seas was opened, a more intimate intercourse has been fostered, the results of which we cannot forecast since they are yet in the making. For all practical purposes, then, we may look upon Indian thought as a closed system or an autonomous growth. Philosophy in India is essentially spiritual. It is the intense spirituality of India and not any great political structure or social organization that it has developed that has enabled it to resist the ravages of time and the accidents of history. External invasions and internal dissensions came very near, crushing its civilization many times in its history. The Greek and the Scythian, the Persian and the Mughal, the French and the English have by turn attempted to suppress it, and yet it has its head held high. India has not been finally subdued, and its old flame of spirit is still burning. Throughout its life, it has been living with one purpose. It has fought for truth and against error. It may have blundered, but it did what it felt able and called upon to do. It may have blundered, but it did what it felt able and called upon to do. The history of Indian thought illustrates the endless quest of the mind, ever old, ever new. The spiritual motive dominates life in India. Indian philosophy has its interest in the haunts of men and not in supralunar solitudes. It takes its origin in life and enters back into life after passing through the schools. The great works of Indian philosophy do not have that ex cathedra character, which is so prominent a feature of the latter criticisms and commentaries. The Gita and the Upanishads are not remote from popular belief. They are the great literature of the country and at the same time vehicles of the great systems of thought. They are the great literature of the country and at the same time vehicles of the great system of thought. The Puranas contain the truth dressed up in myths and stories to suit the weak understanding of the majority. The hard task of interesting the multitude in metaphysics is achieved in India. The founders of philosophy strive for a socio-spiritual reformation of the country. When the Indian civilization is called a Brahmanical one, it only means that its main character and dominating motives are shaped by its philosophical thinkers and religious minds, though these are not all of Brahmin birth. The idea of Plato that philosophers must be the rulers and directors of society is practiced in India. The ultimate truths are truths of spirit, and in the light of them, actually, life has to be refined. The ultimate truths are truths of spirit, and in the light of them, actual life has to be refined. Religion in India is not dogmatic. It is a rational synthesis which goes on gathering into itself new conceptions as philosophy progresses. It is experimental and provisional in its nature, attempting to keep pace with the progress of thought. The common criticism that Indian thought, by its emphasis on intellect, puts philosophy in the place of religion brings out the rational character of religion in India. No religious movement has ever come into existence without developing as its support a philosophic content. Mr. Havel observes, in India, religion is hardly a dogma, but a working hypothesis of human conduct adapted to different stages of spiritual development and different conditions of life. Whenever it tended to crystallize itself in a fixed creed, there were set up spiritual revivals and philosophic reactions which threw beliefs into the crucible of criticism, vindicated the truth, and combated the false. Again and again we shall observe how when traditionally accepted beliefs become inadequate, nay, false on account of changed times, and the age grows out of patience with them, the insight of a new teacher, a Buddha or a Mahavira, a Vyasa or a Shankara supervenes, stirring the depths of spiritual life. These are doubtless great monuments in the history of Indian thought, times of inward testing and vision, when at the summons of the Spirit's breath, blowing where it listeth, and coming whence no one knows, the soul of man makes a fresh start and goes forth on a new venture. It is the intimate relation between the truth of philosophy and the daily life of people that makes religion always alive and real. It is the intimate relation between the truth of philosophy and the daily life of people that makes religion always alive and real. It is the intimate relation between the truth of philosophy and the daily life of people that makes religion always alive and real. The problems of religion stimulate the philosophic spirit. The Indian mind has been traditionally exercised over the questions of the nature of Godhead, the end of life, and the relation of the individual to the universal soul. Though philosophy in India has not, as a rule, completely freed itself from the fascinations of religious speculation, yet the philosophical discussions have not been hampered by religious forms. The two were not confused. On account of the close connection between theory and practice, doctrine and life, a philosophy which could not stand the test of life, not in the pragmatistic, but the larger sense of the term, had no chance of survival. On account of the close connection between theory and practice, doctrine and life, a philosophy which could not stand the test of life, not in the pragmatistic but the larger sense of the term, had no chance of survival. To those who realize the true kinship between life and theory, philosophy becomes a way of life. To those who realize the true kinship between life and theory, philosophy becomes a way of life, an approach to spiritual realization. To those who realize the true kinship between life and theory, philosophy becomes a way of life, an approach to the spiritual realization. To those who realize the true kinship between life and theory, philosophy becomes a way of life, an approach to spiritual realization. There has been no teaching, not even the Samkhya, which remained a mere word of mouth or dogma of schools. Every doctrine is turned into a passionate conviction, stirring the heart of man and quickening his breath. Every doctrine is turned into a passionate conviction, stirring the heart of man and quickening his breath. It is untrue to say that philosophy in India never became self-conscious or critical. Even in its early stages, rational reflection tended to correct religious belief. Witness the advance of religion implied in the progress from the hymns of the Veda to the Upanishads. When we come to Buddhism, the philosophic spirit has already become that confident attitude of mind which, in intellectual matters, bends to no outside authority and recognizes no limit to its enterprise, unless it be as the result of logic, which probes all things, tests all things, and follows fearlessly wherever the argument leads. When we reach the several darshanas, or systems of thought, we have mighty and persistent efforts at systematic thinking. How completely free from traditional religion and bias the systems are will be obvious from the fact that the Sankhya is silent about the existence of God, though certain about its theoretical indemonstrability. Vaishesika and Yoga, while they admit a supreme being, do not consider him to be the creator of the universe, and Jaimini refers to God only to deny his providence and moral government of the world. The early Buddhist systems are known to be indifferent to God, and we have also the materialist Charvakas who deny God, ridicule the priests, revile the Vedas, and seek salvation in pleasure. The supremacy of religion and of social tradition in life does not hamper the free pursuit of philosophy. It is a strange paradox and yet nothing more than the obvious truth that while the social life of an individual is bound by the rigors of caste, he is free to roam in the matter of opinion. Reason freely questions and criticizes the creeds in which men are born. That is why the heretic, the skeptic, the unbeliever, the rationalist, and the freethinker, the materialist, and the hedonist all flourish in the soil of India. The Mahabharata says, "There is no Muni who has not an opinion of his own." All this is evidence of the strong intellectuality of the Indian mind, which seeks to know the inner truth and the law of all sides of human activity. This intellectual impulse is not confined to philosophy and theology, but extends over logic and grammar, rhetoric and language, medicine and astronomy. In fact, all arts and sciences, from architecture to zoology, everything useful to life or interesting to mind becomes an object of inquiry and criticism. It will give an idea of the all-comprehensive character of intellectual life, to know that even such minutiae as the breeding of horses and the training of elephants had their own shastras and literature. Minutiae, such minutiae, such. The philosophic attempt to determine the nature of reality may start either with the thinking self or the objects of thought. In India, the interest of philosophy is in the self of man. Where the vision is turned outward, the rush of fleeting events engages the mind. In India, Atmanam Vidi, know the self, sums up the law and the prophets. Within man is the spirit that is the center of everything. Psychology and ethics are the basal sciences. The life of mind is depicted in all its mobile varieties and subtle play of light and shade. Indian psychology realized the value of concentration and looked upon it as the means for the perception of the truth. It believed that there were no ranges of life or mind which could not be reached by a methodical training of will and knowledge. It believed that there were no ranges of life or mind which could not be reached by a methodical training of will and knowledge. It recognized the close connection of mind and body. The psychic experiences such as telepathy and clairvoyance were considered to be neither abnormal nor miraculous. Nor miraculous. They are not the products of deceased minds or inspiration from the gods. They are not the product of deceased minds or inspiration from the gods, but powers which the human mind can exhibit under carefully ascertained conditions. The mind of man has the three aspects of the subconscious, the conscious and the superconscious, and the abnormal psychic phenomena called by the different names of ecstasy, genius, inspiration, madness, are the workings of the superconscious mind. The yoga system of philosophy deals especially with these experiences, though the other systems refer to them and utilize them for their purposes. The metaphysical schemes are based on the data of the psychological science. The criticism that Western metaphysics is one-sided, since its attention is confined to the waking state alone, is not without its force. There are other states of consciousness as much entitled to consideration as the waking. Indian thought takes into account the modes of waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. If we look upon the waking consciousness as the whole, then we get realistic, dualistic, and pluralistic conceptions of metaphysics. Dream consciousness, when exclusively studied, leads us to subjectivist doctrines. The state of dreamless sleep inclines us to abstract and mystical theories. The whole truth must take all the modes of consciousness into account. The dominance of interest in the subjective does not mean that in objective sciences, India had nothing to say. If we refer to the actual achievements of India in the realm of positive science, we shall see that the opposite is the case. Ancient Indians laid the foundations of mathematical and mechanical knowledge. They measured the land, divided the year, mapped out the heavens, traced the course of the sun and the planets through the zodiacal belt, analyzed the constitution of matter, and studied the nature of birds and beasts, plants, and seeds. We may quote a passage which is certainly not less than 2,000 years before the birth of Copernicus. From the Aitareya Brahmana, the sun never sets nor rises. When people think to themselves the sun is setting, he only changes about after reaching the end of the day, and makes night below and day to what is on the other side. Then when people think he rises in the morning, he only shifts himself about after reaching the end of the night, and makes day below and night to what is on the other side. In fact, he never does set at all. Whatever conclusions we may arrive at as to the original source of the first astronomical ideas current in the world, it is probable that to the Hindus is due the invention of algebra and its application to astronomy and geometry. From them also the Arabs received not only their first conceptions of algebraic analysis, but also those invaluable numerical symbols and decimal notation, now current everywhere in Europe, which have rendered untold service to the progress of arithmetical science. The motions of the moon and the sun were carefully observed by the Hindus, and with such success that their determination of the moon's synodical revolution is a much more correct one than the Greeks ever achieved.